Introduction. The design elements and principles analyze frame for web page design. They can inform us where to begin, what to probe, how to analyze. For example, designer who knows the design elements and principles can analyze the page in terms of line, color, movements, balance, and harmony. Design elements. The elements are components or parts which can be isolated and defined in any visual design or work of art. They can carry a wide variety of messages. The details may be differentiated by researchers. We can see about point, line, shape, forms, space, color, and texture. Point or mark. It is the smallest and most fundamental element. It is the personal handwriting of the artist. They may be natural or learned. These things may vary in size, value, regularity, or irregularity. It can be used alone or as a unit in a group. For example, this is the ink drawings of Van Gogh, Impressionist painter. Line. Line has width and length, but no depth. Artists use lines to create edges and outlines of objects. Horizontal lines are calm and quiet. Vertical lines suggest more of a potential for movement. Shape. Shape is an area that has implied line. Shapes consist of two dimensions, that length and width. They can be geometric or free-form. Design in painting is fundamentally a plan in a work of art. In a picture, the shape artist has placed. They summarize the positive shapes. The spaces around the shapes are the negative spaces. A shape is defined as an area, stands or a round boundary, because of value, color, or texture. A shape is produced when a line encloses an area. Shapes can vary endlessly and can suggest physical form and direct eye movement. Simple shapes are remembered and understood more easily than complex shapes. Color. The first is hue, which is the name of the colors. The primary hues are yellow, red, and blue. Secondary colors are derived from mixing two primaries. Intermediate colors are mixtures of a primary and a secondary color. This refers to the lightness or darkness of hue. The third property of color is intensity. Texture. Texture indicates the surface quality, both simulated and actual, of artwork. The techniques used in painting described to show texture. That is, the dry brush technique. It creates a rough quality and heavy application of pigment. It is achieved with brush or other implement products. Layout. It is the act or an instance of laying out. It has an arrangement or a plan, especially the schematic arrangement of parts or areas. The layout of a printed circuit may be the examples. The overall design of a page, spread, or book, including elements such as page and type size, typeface, titles, and page numbers. Motion graphics. Motion graphics are graphics that use video and or animation technology to create the illusion of motion or transforming appearance. These motion graphics are usually combined with audio for use in multimedia projects. Motion graphics extend beyond the most commonly used methods of frame-by-frame footage and animation. Computers are capable of calculating and randomizing changes in imagery to create the illusion of motion and transformation. The framing effect. The framing effect is the idea that manipulating the way information is presented can influence and alter decision-making and judgment about that information. Through the use of images, words, and by presenting a general context around the information presented, we can influence how people think about that information. The context in which information is delivered shapes assumptions and perception about that information. Information taken out of context is often meaningless. Information within a context within a frame is altered by that context and frame. Surface. Surface pattern design has enjoyed a bit of a revival in recent years, with a new wave of illustrators and designers fueling the growth trend for decorated objects, illustrated goods and aspirational homewares. 10 expert tips for creating your own surface pattern designs, from sourcing inspiration to spotting trends and creating repeat patterns. Observe the world around you. Build your own inspiration library. Map out your ideas. Keep it simple. Upcycle older work. Build repeat patterns. Observe trends and then set your own. Understand the impact of scale. Push yourself in new directions. Read these resources. Graphic design. It functions on graphic design principles in a filmmaking or video production context. They are produced through the use of animation or filmic techniques. The main workpieces are the kinetic typography and graphics. Television and web-based animations are the appropriate examples. It has advanced due to technical sophistication. Visual hierarchy. We have numerous words for frustration when an interface is not directing us to and what we need to know. They are loud, messy, cluttered, and busy. We need them to express our feeling of being overwhelmed. It is possible only on a screen, visually by content page. Often a graphic designer uses it for a long time. It is little more technical when compared to our favorite words. However, it is nice to encapsulate the problem. Then we can work for better solution. In other words, there is a pecking order to things. Some content needs first attention. Next line content will be different. Some needs third level significance. Later on, rest will be in down the line. Top of hierarchy should have most important content. Guidelines. The hierarchy may be made up of a catchy headline. It should be supplied with some supporting motivational copy. It can be perhaps features and benefits of service. It may be a sign-up form and coupled with a submit button. Needs. These elements need to be visually coherent. It should be looking like what they are. This will enable users to be guided through. It will facilitate the logical order. Weak hierarchies where does not help the reader to precise in their efforts. They may vomit some message as important. Advantages. The best visual hierarchies put the users to take the action confidently. They are bestowed with a clear and obvious order. They need to view and act on things. This step would be the most important things. Disadvantages. Poor hierarchies not be able to organize information. It cannot even help readers with a clear idea. Hence, we will be afforded to borrow a word from somewhere else to state our displeasure. We say, there is too much going on here. But what we're really talking about is visual hierarchy. Applications. The design and use of typefaces act as a means of visual communication. This is done through calligraphy. It is an ever-developing usage of digital typeboard. The art and practice of typography started with the invention of movable type and the printing press. Typography. Typography is the art and technique of arranging type design, and modifying typeglyphs. The arrangement of type involves the selection of typefaces, point size, line length, leading, adjusting the spaces between letters, and adjusting the space between pairs of letters. Typography is performed by typesetters, compositors, typographers, graphic designers, art directors, comic book artists, and graffiti artists. Typography is also viewed as encompassing many separate fields. This is done from the designer point of view. The designer will create letter forms to the graphic designer. Elements of composition. Organizing the various elements within the frame of the viewfinder in order to create an effective design is more challenging than it might seem at first. A painter can position the elements where they want, whereas a photographer must search, find, and organize visual elements within the camera viewfinder. Although a photographer can sometimes arrange objects in a natural environment, such as leaves, this often results in a contrived looking picture. Visual rhetoric. What is visual rhetoric? Visual and rhetoric have multiple definitions. For the purposes of our inquiry, we will use the following definitions. Visual includes anything that can be seen as the process of seeing. If a person sits in a meadow and watching a butterfly, their eyes and what they see would be visual. Visual. We will not concern ourselves with expansive notion of visual. Instead, we will examine constructions. Examinations extend beyond the printed word. We will not examine the verbal imagery of poetry, but we will talk about the design and layout of text. Rhetoric. Rhetoric defined as an investigation of the effects of human subjects in particular situations. Investigations are motivated by theoretical concerns. It is often highly pragmatic concern. The effects are determined based on probability, include a wide range of possible effects. What is discourse? Discourse is roughly equivalent to language, text or utterances. Put signs, icons, symbols, etc. Human subjects mean people in all their complexity, identified with groups or communities based on their affiliations and their differences. And finally, particular situations refers to where and when. Working definition. Visual rhetoric is a theoretical and practical investigation of the effects of image-based signifying systems on human subjects in particular situations. We will be talking or listening and reading or writing about seeing with the above considerations in mind. Possibilities. Whenever you are faced with organizing information, it may seem that there are million options ahead. In reality, there are infinite possibilities for designing anything. But when it comes to organizing information, only 5 ways to do it. Imagine your boss asks you to organize all of the sales and product manuals that your company has collected over the past decades. How would you organize them? Alphabetically, by the year they were produced, by area of the country in which the products are manufactured, by color. History. Information design forefather Richard Saul Berman has suggested the following 5 ways to categorize: latch, location, alphabet, time, category, and hierarchy. Whenever you want to think of these 5 methods, choose the best one. Maps. Maps are really common ways to organize by location. You might also show a diagram of the human brain, and the hypothalamus is in relation to the cerebellum. Whatever your reason, organizing by location is usually required. Key. The key helps the reader or viewer to know the terms, and they have something to look up. Let's say if a person wants to learn biology but doesn't know the names of the parts of a cell, the keys in the biology book will help him to learn better. For example, the index in the back of a textbook or in a dictionary are the best examples for organizing information by key. Alphabetical order. Let us take the example of the website given here. There is a problem in the website organization. You could see the long menus in alphabetical order. If the terms used did not make sense to the viewer, alphabetical order won't be helpful. Alphabetical order works well for fiction novels, but not for non-fiction reference books. Organizing information by time is useful for finding information in a chronological pattern, by the months or years in which events happen. Time is also good for showing how things happen over a fixed duration. Consider a flowchart that describes a process. For example, how chicken nuggets are made from beginning to end of cycle. Categories. Categories are useful for a number of purposes, like describing different animal types or organizing a grocery store. If they were organized by category instead of time, you can use categories to organize information, whether it is by color, shape, gender, model, price, or anything else. Hierarchy. Hierarchies are useful when showing how one piece of information is connected to another. Hierarchies are used in organizational charts to show who reports to whom. Hierarchy is also used to show scale, like biggest to smallest or heaviest to lightest. Design description. A professional designer with many years of experience will be able to balance the factors intuitively. Students of design must take more care to consider all the relevant factors. Designer handles these factors. Dick Powell in Equinox TV program of Designing Dream Machines has said, the process is described as an explosion in reverse. Designer activities. And a writer will keep climax of their story at beginning. It will leave the readers with no context, why they should take that action. They use hierarchy to tell a story. Fashion. Product design follows patterns or trends in style. These trends are closely linked to fashion. Victorian 1930s to 1980, Art Nouveau 1890 to 1905, Art Deco 1925 to 1939, Pop Art 1960s. Fashion becoming an important part of modern Western culture. Good design has become more readily available to everyone. Although products designed by leading designers are still quite expensive, the mass-produced products tend to follow the style set by these designers. Factors considered by designers when creating illustration and visual design. Graphic designers or graphic artists plan, analyze, and create visual solutions to communications problems. They find the most effective way to get messages across in print and electronic media using color, type, illustration, photography, animation, and various print and layout techniques. Other skills required. Other qualifications. In addition to post-secondary training in graphic design, creativity, communication, and problem-solving skills are crucial. Graphic designers must be creative and able to communicate their ideas visually, verbally, and in writing. They also must have an eye for details. We have outlined 12 essential rules to follow in order to design an effective visual design. They are: preliminary work is a must. Create balance. Size matters. Clever use of color. Design style should suit the company. Typography matters a lot. The goal is recognition. Dare to be different. Keep it simple and sweet. Go easy on effects. Develop a design assembly line. Use other designs for inspiration only. Preliminary work is a must. Preliminary sketches are an important first step in designing an effective logo. These can be as simple as paper and pen drawings or drafts made using a vector program such as Illustrator. The bottom line is that you compromise the final result if you rush or skip this step. Start with 20 to 30 sketches or ideas and then branch out to create variations of the original ideas. If nothing seems to work, start over and begin sketching new ideas. An effective graphic designer will spend more time on this preliminary work than any other step in the design process. Create balance. Balance is important in logo design because our minds naturally perceive a balanced design as being pleasing and appealing. Keep your logo balanced by keeping the weight of the graphics, colors, and size equal on each side. Though the rule of balance can occasionally be broken, remember that your logo will be viewed by the masses, not just those with an eye for a great art. So, a balanced design is the safest approach. Size matters. When it comes to logo design, size does matter. A logo has to look good and be legible at all sizes. A logo is not effective if it loses too much definition when scaled down for letterheads, envelopes, and small promotional items. The logo also has to look good when used for larger formats such as posters, billboards, and electronic formats such as TV and the web. The most reliable way to determine if a logo works at all sizes is to actually test it yourself. Clever use of color. Color theory is complex, but designers who understand the basics are able to use colors to their advantage. The basic rules to keep in mind are: use colors near to each other on the color wheel. Example, for a warm palette, use red, orange, and yellow hues. Don't use colors that are so bright that they are hard on eyes. The logo must also look good in black and white, grayscale, and two colors. Breaking the rules sometimes is okay. Just make sure you have a good reason to. Knowing how colors evoke feelings and moods is also important. For example, red can evoke feelings of aggression, love, passion, and strength. Keep this in mind as you try out different color combinations and try to match the color to the overall tone and feel of the brand. Playing around with individual colors on their own is another good idea. Some brands are recognizable solely by their distinct color. Design style should suit the company. You can use various design styles when creating a logo, and to pick the right one, you should have some background information about the client and the brand. Typography matters a lot. Choosing the right font type and size is much more difficult than many beginner designers realize. If your logo design includes text, either as a part of the logo or in the tagline, you will need to spend time sorting through various font types, often dozens of them, and testing them in your design before making a final decision. Try both serif and sans serif fonts as well as script, italics, bold, and custom fonts. Consider three main points when choosing a font to accompany your logo design. Avoid the most commonly used fonts, such as Comic Sans, or else your design may come off as amateurish. Make sure the font is legible when scaled down, especially with script fonts. One font is ideal and avoid more than two. The goal is recognition. The whole point of creating a logo is to build brand recognition. So, how do you go about doing this? Well, it varies from case to case, but the goal with the logo is for the average person to instantly call the brand to mind. Few examples of this are the logos of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, McDonald's, and Nike. Just a glimpse of any of these logos is all you need to recognize the brands. The key to making a popular and recognizable logo is to combine all of the elements discussed in this section: size, style, color, typography, and originality. Dare to be different. To stand out from the competition, you must distinguish yourself as a designer with a distinct style. Rather than copying another design or style, be innovative and stand out from the crowd. KISS. Keep it simple and sweet. The simpler the logo, the more recognizable it will be. For example, the Nike swoosh is an extremely simple logo and is also one of the most recognizable in the world. Follow the KISS rule right from the start of the design process when you are brainstorming ideas and doodling sketches. Often you will find that you start with a relatively complicated design and end up with a simpler version of it in the end. Work the design down to its essentials and leave out all the unnecessary elements. Go easy on effects. Adobe Illustrator, Freehand, Photoshop, and other graphic design programs are extremely powerful tools and have many filters and effects that you can apply to your logo. But don't get carried away. There's a time and place for these powerful tools, but it is not necessarily to design a logo. Of course, playing around and seeing whether they enhance a logo is fine, but just remember that simplicity is key. Develop a design assembly line. To produce consistently high quality logos, you need to develop your own design process or assembly line. This should include the following steps: research, brainstorm and generate ideas, preliminary sketches, develop vector designs, send to client, add or remove anything the client wants, finalize the design and resubmit to client. Use other designs for inspiration only. The last rule for designing an effective logo is quite simple. Don't copy other designers' work. While there is nothing wrong with being inspired by other designers, copying another person's idea or work is morally and legally wrong. Designing for screen. Arrange text in the proper size, color, and font on a multimedia screen. Choose an appropriate background color and understand how foreground text colors interact with background screen colors. Arrange pictures on the screen either as background images. Layout. Multimedia screens consist of text, pictures, icons, triggers, and buttons. The relationships among these elements on the screen are called layout. When you create a multimedia screen, you should plan its layout so your content gets presented with good balance. Also, think about how the user will interact with your screen and include navigational buttons and hypertext links. Screen crowding. A famous quote by John Lee Hooker, which is less is more. Same applies to graphic and multimedia screen design. Don't ask the question, what else can I fit in? But ask, what can I leave out? Screen crowding is also an issue for web pages because too many images will slow down the downloading. Scrolling and pagination. Web page designers often use scrolling text on pages. Scrolling is required where too large amount of text is to be displayed. Scrolling is almost always better option than pagination because whenever the user goes to the next page, a new page is being downloaded. For example, CD-ROMs and other multimedia presentations. Designer has more flexibility to lay out the text to rest of the screen. Attention-getting devices. Animated GIFs, flashing lights, noises, rollover are all great devices. They are for getting the user's attention. Beware, watch that they don't draw the user's eye. They certainly grab your attention. It also depends on the type of presentation you're developing. Like children's CD-ROMs, these devices can be a lot of fun. Windows. Pop-up windows and dialog boxes can be very handy. It is happening when the viewer is expected to return where they were previously. This helps prevent the user getting confused or lost in the navigation. When the user is finished with the window, they click OK or Done. It disappears and they never go out of sight. Screen resolution. We are always restricted to the shape and size of the monitor. It is a rectangle with a width to height ratio 3:4. The standard minimum size is 640 pixels by 480 pixels. Most computers have a screen resolution of at least 800 into 600 pixels. Our web page has to be designed in such a way that it is clearly viewable even in the smallest screen resolution. Type styles and sizes. Type is a vital part of and is present on interface design. Text is an obvious and integral tool of communication. The following factors are to be considered in selecting font styles and sizes. They are legibility, size, contrast, fonts, style, layout, alignment, proportion, and crowding. Legibility. It can be very frustrating for the user when text is hard to read because the text is too small. The background is too lively and the background color clashes or doesn't contrast with the text. The usual size for text to be easily read on an average size monitor. It should be at least 12 points and up to 18 points for body text. Otherwise, the eyes has trouble in identifying the letters. Font selection. Font technology enables you to place any font on the screen in any size and in any color you want. There are hundreds of different fonts available, but be careful when you choose a font for multimedia application. You can rely on all Windows and Macintosh fonts. You must publish the font along with your application. Most fonts are licensed and protected by copyright, and make sure you have permission for any fonts you distribute. Few styles of fonts are given here, for example, Times New Roman, Courier New, Arial, Georgia, and Vodana. Style. Most programs can impose on your text for different effects such as normal, bold, italic, underline, strike through, and reverse. Bold and italic text should be kept at a minimum, otherwise it loses its potency. However, they both tend to be more effective than underlines. The web tends to indicate a link. Using all capitals can be hard to read, a bit boring, and ultimately obnoxious. Layout. There are a few basic standards for what type of layout designers use for specific purpose. The alignment applies to how a body of text lines up in a column. Left aligned. All type is lined up straight on the left-hand side, but random on the right. Used mostly for newsletters and forms. Right aligned. Type is lined up on the right-hand side, but random on the left. Used only for special circumstances. Center aligned. All lines are balanced on the central axis and both ends are random. Used for headings, quotations, and small pieces of text. Justified. Lines up evenly on both sides. Generally used in books and large blocks of text. Spatial relationships in the interface. We went from having a maximum of 2 monitors desktops side by side to having multiple display monitors and mobile devices. Sitting on a desk in less static configurations. Larger wall displays and collaborative tabletop surfaces. Displays are usually pretty disconnected from each other. Spatial relationships in the interface. Enter the perspective cursor. Instead of moving in the separate coordinate spaces of 2 planar surfaces, cursor moves in a spherical coordinate space, projected appropriately to each display. This results in seamless movement between the displays. There are all kinds of interesting things you can do to correct display perspective. You can do it once you start tracking users' viewpoints. This tracking has never been easier with hardware like the Kinect. Spatial relationships and filtering. Spatial uses secondary filters to determine spatial relationship between entities in the database. The spatial relationship is based on geometry locations. The most common spatial relationships are based on topology and distance. For example, the boundary of an area consists of a set of curves that separates the area from the rest of the coordinate space. To determine spatial relationships, Spatial has several secondary filter methods. The SDO relate operator evaluates topological criteria. The SDO within distance operator determines. If 2 spatial objects are within a specified distance of each other, The STONN operator identifies the nearest neighbors for a spatial objects. Spatial relationships and filtering. The STO-relate operator implements a 9-intersection model for binary topological between points, lines, and polygons. Each spatial object has an interior, a boundary, and an exterior. The boundary consists of points or lines. It separates the interior from the exterior. The boundary of a line string consists of its endpoints. Symbols and semiotics in the surface. The study of signs and how they are used is referred to as semiotics. It examines how words work and how they are used, and also looking images, sounds, music, code, patterns, and more. It allows an unique interplay of visuals, audio, words, and interfaces. Symbols and semiotics in the surface. The semiotics is chiefly concerned with the analysis of signs and symbols and their meaning. Signs and symbols can be studied not only in language but also in rituals, culture, images, and art that can be read as text. Semiotic researchers do not study signs in isolation. They study conventions governing the use of signs and sign systems. Meaning, also known in semiotic terms as the signified. This is what a creator wants to communicate and what an audience understands. These two things unfortunately are rarely congruent. Almost always some meaning is conveyed accidentally or gets lost on the way from the creator to the audience. Semiotics defined. Semiotics is concerned with everything. It can be taken as a sign. Words, images, actions, and objects can all be studied as signs. It is considered as long as they have been recorded in some way. It can be studied in writing or on video. It refers to semiotics as the science of meaning. Semiotics concepts. Signifier and signified sign. Object and interpretant. Icon, index, and symbol. Encoding and decoding. Pragmatic, semantic, and syntactic. Syntagmatic analysis. Paradigmatic analysis. Polysemy. Signifier. This is what creators present to their audience to convey meaning, and what audiences imbue with meaning when they are presented with it. A signifier itself has no meaning, but it generates meaning when people use it to say something or gain any sort of understanding from it. Signs. A sign emerges when a signifier and a meaning come together. A meaning can be conveyed with a multitude of signifiers. A signifier creates multitude meanings depending on interpretation. Each combination of signifier and meaning gets counted as a sign. Many signs are part of language systems like spoken languages, musical notation, traffic signage, and stereotype. Signs. The meaning of signs arbitrary. It is the cultural context that frames the interpretation of signs and imbues signs with localized meanings. Signs can also change their meaning over time, used in information systems, management, and marketing. Signifier and signified. For example, a thought, a feeling, or a thing. A signifier is used by the person wanting to communicate. The signified is what the sign or symbol represents, what it is interpreted to mean by the receiver of the communication. Sign, object, and interpretant. The sign that stands for something else. The object, it refers to what the sign represents. The interpretant, who fulfills the office of an interpreter. This refers to the interpretation placed on the sign. Peirce view recognizes that the same sign can have different meanings depending upon the context. Icon. This is one form of signs. A signifier is perceived to be similar to a meaning. For example, When an image looks similar to what a viewer thinks as an apple, it looks like an apple, then this image means apple to that viewer and we have an icon. Index. This is one form of signs. It is a signifier that has a causal relationship with a meaning. When a viewer sees smoke coming out of a building and concludes there must be a fire, then the smoke means burning building to that viewer. Or when a person hears a sound, recognize it as a fire engine siren. Symbol. To icons and indexes, symbols are arbitrary signs. The connection between one specific signifier and one specific meaning is not based on similarity or casual. It is based only on conventions, laws and rules, and these are established by humans. The signs A, P, L and E arranged in sequence as apple. Encoding and decoding. The only way that messages can be sent from one person to another is via the use of a code. Encoding is the process of transforming any message. Decoding is the process of reading the message and understanding. For example, consider the road code. Who can read the road signs correctly is allowed to obtain a driver's license. Pragmatic, semantic and syntactic. Semiotic researchers make a distinction between various levels of the meaning of signs. The pragmatic level refers to the cultural context takes place and assume the sign to mean in a particular situation. The semantic level refers to the precise meaning of the signs. What do the signs refer to in any given context? Syntagmatic analysis. Syntagmatic analysis involves studying the structure of a text and the relationships between its parts. There are three syntagmatic relationships: sequential relationships found in film and television narrative sequences, spatial relationships found in posters and photographs. There is one more conceptual relationship, such as in an argument. Paradigmatic analysis. A paradigm is a set of associated signifiers or signifies. They are all members of some defining category, but in which each is significantly different. A paradigmatic analysis involves studying the oppositions between the signifiers. Polysemy. Text and signs can have multiple meanings. Barthes suggests that all images are polysemous. Images imply a floating chain of signified with the reader able to choose some and ignore others. Scott says that meaning is not static, and that the meaning of text and signs is continuously shifting. How to use semiotics. The qualitative researcher using semiotics to study the signs and symbols. They are used in a particular domain. They help us to identify the conventions of their use. They have to decode the meanings conveyed by the signs. The idea is to uncover the rules that govern human behavior. Critique of semiotics. Semiotics is potentially a very powerful way of analyzing and interpreting qualitative data. It is highly useful in business and organizational settings. Semiotics is well grounded in linguistics and structural anthropology. It is relatively easy to justify. Disadvantage of semiotics is tendency to treat people as somewhat passive. Visual design methodology. A narrative or story in its broadest sense is anything told or recounted more narrowly, and usually something told or recounted in the form of casually linked set of events. Account, tale, the telling of an happening or connected series of happenings, whether true or fictitious. To say what something means to say, how it is related or connected to something else. To ask the meaning of an event is to ask how it is contributed to the story in which it occurs. It is the connections or relations between events. Visual design methodology. We are always developing new strategies that allow our clients to expand operations while doing less. Business process automation reduces the amount of human resources necessary to complete a job while increasing return on investment, ROI. Life is all about investments, making the right decisions at the right time. There are three fundamental principles involved in the use of visible language. Organize. Provide the user with a clear and consistent conceptual structure. Economize. To do the most with the least amount of cost. Communicate. Match the presentation to the capabilities of the user. Organize. Consistency, screen layout, relationships, and navigability are important concepts of organization. Consistency. There are four views of consistency: internal consistency, external consistency, real-world consistency, and when not to be consistent. Internal consistency states the same conventions and rules should be applied to the all elements of GUI, graphical user interface. For example, internal consistency: dialog boxes should be consistent all over the GUI. External consistency: the second point says the existing platforms and cultural conventions should be followed across user interfaces. Example: external consistency for text tool icons. Real-world consistency means conventions should be made consistent with real-world experiences, observations, and perceptions of the user. Example: real-world consistency. Innovation deals with when not to be consistent. Deviating from the existing conventions should only be done if it provides a clear benefit to the user. Economize. Four major points to be considered: simplicity, clarity, distinctiveness, and emphasis. Simplicity. Simplicity includes only the elements that are most important for communication. It should also be as unobtrusive as possible. Example: complicated and simpler designs. Clarity. All components should be designed so their meaning is not ambiguous. Example: ambiguous and clear icons. Distinctiveness. The important properties of the necessary elements should be distinguishable. Emphasis. The most important elements should be easily perceived. Non-critical elements should be de-emphasized and clutter should be minimized so as not to hide critical information. Communicate. The GUI must keep in balance legibility, readability, typography, symbolism, multiple views, and color or texture in order to communicate successfully. Visual coding layout principles. The big picture. We will define any considerations that your project may require, such as long-term or short-term strategy, logistics, deployment, and publishing. The deliverable. We will agree upon the service to be provided for project scope, workflow milestones, and drop-dead deadlines. Documentation. A formal budget and contract will be drawn upon and agreed upon the parties involved by both the parties. The design and development process will begin by thoroughly studying the materials provided, documenting and reflecting upon meetings, and performing additional research as needed. Both electronic and traditional mockups, sketches, and/or models will be produced, keeping both the creative ideas of a team and those of your own close to the core of the development process. After all preliminary design work in process has reached its fullest potential, the client will be provided with project deliverables to close the process out and fulfill the production contract. Publishing, maintenance, and hosting of the web systems can be performed with an appropriate contract.